Somewhere in rural Texas, a farmer ran out of house before he ran out of shop. So he framed off the back corner of his equipment building, ran water and wire to it, put in a bathroom and a bed, and moved in. The neighbors said he was living in a barn. He was warm, he was dry, and he did not owe anybody 30 years of payments. 2 decades later, that idea is one of the fastest growing categories in American housing, and the numbers are the reason. In South Carolina, a finished Barndominium runs $130 to $180 per square foot. Traditional construction in that same state runs $220 to $300. Meanwhile, the median American house costs $440,000, and by the time the note is paid, you will have handed a bank several $100,000 more on top of the price. So here is the question this video answers. If it is cheaper, faster, and stronger, and it is all three, why can so many people not legally build one? It is not banned in any state. Not one. What stops it is not an engineer, and it is not a structural standard. It is a rule about how your house is permitted to look. Before anything else, I owe you 2 corrections on my own title, because if I let you find them yourself, you would rightly stop trusting anything else I say. Start with 50%. That number is real in some markets and not in others. In South Carolina, finished Barndominiums run $130 to $180 per square foot, while traditional construction runs $220 to $300. Take the midpoints, and you are looking at something close to 45% less. So in that state, on those numbers, the headline holds. But comparing like against like, across the country, the honest figure is smaller. A Barndominium typically runs 15 to 30% below comparable stick-built construction, not half, 15 to 30. Anyone selling you a flat 50% is either comparing an owner-directed build against a turnkey custom home, or they are not comparing anything at all. Now the second correction, builds in days. The shell does. A metal or post-frame shell reaches weather tight in roughly 2 to 4 weeks, and small ones go up considerably faster than that. But a finished Barndominium permits, foundation, systems, interior, inspections, runs 6 to 12 months, same as any house. So the honest sentence is that the structure goes up fast and the house takes a year. Now look at what those 2 admissions actually cost you. 15% of a $400,000 house is $60,000. 30% is $120,000. Nobody in America turns down $60,000 because it was not $180,000. And nobody walks away from a shell that reaches weather tight in a month because it was not a weekend. The corrected numbers are still extraordinary, which makes the real question sharper, not softer. If this thing genuinely saves a family 6 figures, who exactly benefits from you never building one? Before we follow the money, understand why the building is cheap, because it is not a trick and it is not lower quality. Think about a card table. 4 legs, 1 at each corner, each one fairly slim. Now think about a picnic table. 2 heavy trestles, and they hold considerably more weight. That is the whole difference between stick framing and post frame. A conventionally framed wall puts a stud every 16 inches. Dozens of small members, each carrying a small share of the load. Every one of them has to be cut, placed, plumbed, nailed, and later insulated around, wired around, and drywalled over. A post-frame building sets heavy posts every 8 or 10 feet. Fewer legs, each one doing far more work. Count what disappears when you do that. You stop buying and handling hundreds of studs. You stop paying for the labor of standing them. And because those big posts either go into the ground or sit on brackets on isolated footings, you often skip pouring a continuous perimeter foundation around the entire building, which in conventional construction is one of the largest line items before anything is even standing. The roof follows the same logic. Long-span trusses land on those widely spaced posts, which means nothing is required in the middle of the building, no interior load-bearing walls. Which is why Barndominium floor plans are so open, and why you can move a wall 10 years from now with a hammer instead of an engineer. Then the skin. Metal panels go on fast in big pieces over a frame that was designed to receive them. So the savings are not one clever thing. They are four ordinary things stacked. Fewer structural members, less foundation, faster enclosure, and no interior structure to design around. Fewer parts, fewer trades, fewer days on site. And that speed is not a rounding error. Every week a crew is not on your property is a week you are not paying them. And on a construction loan, it is a week of interest you are not carrying. Now, where did this building actually come from? Because its ancestry explains everything that happens next. This building was not designed as a house. It was a barn that somebody moved into. That is not a criticism. It is the literal history, and it is the single most important fact in this entire video, because everything that happens at the permit counter 30 years later flows directly from it. Post-frame construction was developed for agriculture, machine sheds, hay storage, equipment buildings, livestock shelters. The whole system exists because a farmer needed to enclose a large volume cheaply, quickly, and with a clear span wide enough to turn a tractor around inside. Then farmers started finishing corners of them. A shop with a bathroom. A shop with a bathroom and a kitchen. A shop with a bathroom, a kitchen, and a couple of bedrooms framed off the back because the building was already there, already dry, already paid for, and the alternative was a mortgage. The name that eventually got attached to it tells you the same story. Barn plus condominium. A working building with living quarters welded onto the concept. And for a long time that was fine, because it happened on farms. Nobody in agricultural country was reviewing anybody's elevation drawings. Now here is where the ancestry becomes a problem. Zoning does not classify buildings by how well they perform. It classifies them by use and by appearance. Those are the two questions a zoning ordinance is actually built to ask: what is this for, and what does it look like next to its neighbors? And a barndominium was born answering both of those questions wrong. It is used as a house, but it looks like a barn. It is engineered as a dwelling, but it descends from a category of structure that most residential districts specifically exclude. So when this building shows up in a residential zone, it does not arrive as a house that happens to be unusual. It arrives carrying an agricultural pedigree that the paperwork can see from across the room. The engineering caught up decades ago, the classification never did. Which brings us to the uncomfortable part, because on the merits, this thing should have won already. Line the two buildings up and score them honestly. Cost: 15 to 30% below comparable stick-built as a general figure, and in some markets closer to 45. That is $60,000 to $120,000 on a typical build, and in South Carolina, the shell alone runs $30 to $50 a square foot. Speed: weather tight in 2 to 4 weeks instead of months, which means the interior trades start sooner and the construction loan carries less interest. Flexibility: no interior load-bearing walls, so the floor plan is genuinely yours and stays negotiable for the life of the building. Move a wall in 15 years and you are hiring a drywall crew, not an engineer. And then the one that should end the argument entirely: strength. There is an assumption baked into how these buildings get treated that a metal building is the flimsy option, the temporary option, the thing you put up when you cannot afford a real house. That assumption is wrong, and the people who know it best are the ones building on hurricane coasts. Properly engineered metal buildings perform genuinely well in high wind events. That is not a manufacturer's claim. It is one of the specific reasons barndominiums are attractive in coastal Georgia, where the windborne debris region and the high-velocity hurricane zone require engineering well above standard code minimum. Read that again. In the part of the country where the wind actually tries to take your house apart, this construction type is not a compromise. It is a reason to choose it. So, put the scorecard together. Cheaper, faster, more flexible, and in the conditions that destroy houses, stronger. A product that beats the incumbent on 4 measurements at once should take over its market. That is how the cell phone took the landline and how the LED took the light bulb. It did not happen. And it did not fail on the merits because it does not lose on any of the 4. It loses somewhere else entirely, and once you see where, you cannot unsee it. So let us follow the money gear by gear, because there are 7 of them, and everyone is protecting something. Gear 1. The Homeowners Association. An HOA can ban a barndominium outright, and many do, straightforwardly, in writing. Their governing documents prohibit the building type, or metal siding, or barn-style architecture, or, and this phrasing shows up repeatedly, any structure that resembles an agricultural building. Notice what is being regulated there. Not strength, not safety, resemblance. And zoning approval and HOA approval are 2 entirely separate hurdles. A county can approve your build, and your HOA can still say no, on appearance alone, with no obligation to explain anything structural. Gear 2. The Zoning Board. In residential districts, design standards frequently get written around traditional construction aesthetics. Minimum roof pitch, exterior material requirements, architectural review, and where those standards exist, a metal-sided building may require a variance or may not be permitted at all. Gear 3, and this is the one that made me sit up. Minimum masonry rules. Cities can and do require that a specified percentage of your exterior be brick or stone. That is a law telling you which material your outside wall must be made of, not how strong, which material. Gear 4. Minimum square footage. Some counties require 1,200 square feet or more for a legal dwelling, which eliminates the small, efficient, affordable version of this build before anybody looks at a drawing. Gear 5. The Trap. Accessory structure classification. Pitch your project as a barn or shop with living quarters, and some jurisdictions will treat it as an accessory building, and an accessory building cannot be your house. Some places go further and regulate the ratio of non-living space, so a large shop attached to a modest home can disqualify the whole thing. Gear 6. The Appraiser. Value gets established by comparable sales, and in most neighborhoods there are no barndominium comps. On paper, your cheaper and stronger house is worth an uncertain number. Gear 7. The lender, who will not write against a number the appraiser cannot produce, and behind them, the insurer, unfamiliar with the type, offering limited coverage or charging more for perceived risk. Now here is the part where I have to be honest with you, because the easy version of this video says a cartel did it on purpose. Nobody wrote these rules to stop barndominiums. Most of them predate barndominiums entirely. They were written to keep neighborhoods looking uniform because uniform reads as stable, and stable reads as value, and value is what every one of those 7 gears is actually protecting. There is no meeting, there is no mustache. There is a machine assembled from 7 separate self-interests, and this building happens to fail a test that was already sitting there waiting, which is why a builder in this industry put the whole thing in one sentence. The more attractive the proposed building is perceived to be, the less likely it is to be challenged. Perceived, that is the standard, not measured. If you tell anyone you are considering this, you will hear three objections: from a builder, from an inspector, and from a brother-in-law who watched one video. Let me hand you the answer to each, because you are going to need them at a kitchen table before you ever need them at a permit counter. The first: it is a metal building. It will be an oven in July and a freezer in January. That objection is half right, and the half that is right matters. Steel conducts heat and cold aggressively. Thermal bridging through steel framing is a genuine performance problem, and bad insulation stuffed between steel framing underperforms badly, considerably worse than the number on the package suggests. But that is a solved problem with a known price. Closed-cell spray foam is the standard answer. It is why nearly every serious Barndominium budget includes it, and it is not optional on this construction type. Insulate it correctly, and it performs. Try to save money there, and the objection becomes correct. So, the honest response is, yes, if you cheap out on insulation. No, if you budget it properly from day one. The second: it will not hold its value. You will never get your money out. The data says otherwise, with a condition attached. Well-built Barndominiums in desirable locations have shown solid value retention, driven by lower construction costs, energy efficiency, and durability. And rural Barndominiums with acreage have shown particularly strong appreciation in the post-pandemic market. The condition is in that sentence: well-built, desirable location, acreage. A carefully finished Barndominium on 20 rural acres behaves very differently from a bare metal box on a leftover lot. The third objection is the real one, and it is the honest one. You will be told you can build it, but you will never get it approved. That is partly true, and it is aimed at the wrong villain. It is not the building that fails. It is not the structure, the engineering, the wind rating, or the energy performance. It is the elevation drawing, the picture of what the outside looks like, which is genuinely good news, and here is why. A structural problem is expensive to solve. An appearance problem is a design decision, and many plans can be modified with different siding, stone accents, a changed roof pitch, relocated garage doors, added porches, or more residential exterior styling. A residential-looking design with porches, real windows, finished siding, and a balanced elevation gets approved in places where a plain metal building look does not. Same house? Same savings? Different face? Now the part that decides your whole project, and it happens before you own anything. The map. Take Texas, because it is the clearest example in the country. Texas counties generally have no zoning authority at all. Cities have full zoning and building code authority. Read what that means. On unincorporated county land outside city limits, there is often no zoning classification standing between you and a Barndominium. Cross into the city, and there is a full apparatus zoning classifications, exterior material requirements, minimum masonry rules, architectural standards. Same building, same plans, same engineer. The line on the map is the whole difference. And there is a middle zone people get caught in. Land in a city's extraterritorial jurisdiction sits outside city limits, but is still subject to certain city controls, usually around subdivision platting, road access, and infrastructure. You think you are in the clear because you are outside the sign, and you are partly not. The pattern repeats nationwide with local variations. Rural and agricultural zones are the friendly ground because they allow mixed-use structures and carry fewer aesthetic requirements. Unincorporated rural land is consistently the easiest place to build one. Urban areas, historic districts, and HOA subdivisions are the hard ground. Then, geography changes what you must engineer. Coastal counties require wind resistance well above standard code minimum, and if your parcel sits in a wind-borne debris region, your structural drawings have to demonstrate it. That is a cost, and it is also the situation where the building type performs best. So here is the sequence that actually protects you, and I want it in this order. Identify the county and the zoning classification before you make an offer on land. Not after, before. Call the county planning office with the parcel number in front of you and ask 3 specific things. Is residential construction permitted by right in this district? What setbacks apply? And are there any overlay districts on this parcel? Then pull the deed and read the restrictions yourself, because a deed restriction beats a friendly county every single time. A property can be zoned for residential construction and still be governed by covenants that prohibit metal buildings by name. Most people do this backwards. They fall in love with land, they buy it, and then they find out what they are allowed to put on it. Do it the other way, and the machine has nothing to grind. You did not beat it. You bought outside it. Now the details I held back, because they only matter to someone who has already decided to do this. And if you are still here, you have decided. I can tell. 6 things that bite people, and the cheap fix for each. 1. Get engineer-stamped structural drawings from the beginning. Some counties are simply unfamiliar with steel-framed homes and will require certification before they will look at your file. Showing up with the stamp already in hand turns a 3-month argument into a routine submission. 2. Spend your design money on the front elevation. This is the highest return dollar in the entire project. Porches, real residential windows, stone or brick accents on the visible face, a roof pitch that matches the neighborhood. You are not compromising the building, the structure, the span, the savings, all of it stays. You are changing what the reviewer sees, and the reviewer is the obstacle. 3. Get insurance quotes before you build, not after. Some insurers are unfamiliar with Barndominiums and will offer limited coverage or charge higher premiums for perceived risk. Find the carrier who writes these routinely while you can still change your plans, rather than discovering the number after the slab is poured. 4. Septic and driveway are separate permits with separate timelines, and in many counties, septic approval must be in hand before the building permit issues. That is not a formality you handle later. It is a gate at the front of the process, and it is where schedules quietly die. 5. If you are anywhere near a coast or a high-wind region, budget the engineering above code minimum from the start. It is required, it is not cheap, and it is also the reason your building will still be standing. 6. Read your own deed restrictions before you close on land. Not the listing, not what the seller says, the actual recorded document. Private covenants can prohibit metal buildings by name in a place where the county would have said yes without blinking. None of these 6 are expensive. Every one of them is expensive if you meet it in the wrong order. So picture the piece of land you would actually build on. Somewhere you have driven past, or somewhere you already own. Picture the building standing on its porch across the front, windows where windows go, the shop bay at the far end, where you would keep the tractor or the boat or the workbench you have wanted for 15 years. Now picture what stands between you and that, because it is not what you would guess. It is not an engineer telling you the structure is unsafe. It is not a code official pointing at a failed load calculation. Metal buildings, properly engineered, outperform the house next door in the wind that matters. It is a sentence, written into a covenant or a zoning ordinance, about metal siding or roof pitch or what percentage of your exterior has to be brick. That is the answer to the question in the title. No state banned this. It is legal in all 50. What stops it is a rule about appearance, enforced with the force of law, protecting a number on somebody else's property. And I am not going to tell you those rules are evil, because they are not. They were written by people trying to keep their neighborhoods stable and their equity intact, and most of them were written before anybody used the word Barndominium. But you should know exactly what you are up against, because it is not a physics problem. It is a paperwork problem, and paperwork problems are solvable by people who read the paperwork first. So here is what I want you to do this week. It costs nothing and it takes about 20 minutes. Find the parcel you would build on, or the one you already own, and get 2 numbers. Call the county planning office and ask for the minimum square footage required for a legal single-family dwelling on that parcel. Then ask whether any exterior material requirement applies, a masonry percentage, a siding restriction, an architectural review. If the land is in a subdivision, pull the deed restrictions and read them yourself. Put both numbers in the comments with your state. The minimum square footage and the material rule. I read every one of these, and I want to see how big the wall actually is, county by county, because I suspect it varies far more than anybody realizes. And next time, the design changes that get a metal building approved in a district that says no to metal buildings, the exact features that turn a rejection into a permit, and what each one costs.